and welcome to Coffee and Careers Alumni Chats today. Thank you for joining us and our amazing panelists. My name is Annie Liu. I'm a career peer here. I'm a senior cognitive science major. And today we will be chatting with Ragini. She's an environmental engineer currently at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So it's very exciting. Thank you for being here today again. And then
Yeah.
before we begin, like Bonchik has said, we want to let our attendees know we're going to keep the Q&A questions to the last 10 minutes. We are running on a tight schedule, just to let everyone know. But without further ado, we can just get started. So again, Rajani, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to hear more about your current company, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and then your position as an environmental engineer then.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As you mentioned, I currently work with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So the National Lab is actually an organization that supports the country's defense mission. And so as an environmental engineer, I am working a little bit separately from what the mission of the lab is itself, in that we do remediation, which is the cleanup of historical like spills and anything going on underground due to previous activities that happened at the lab there. So even before the lab was there, when it was owned by the Navy, and there was a bunch of stuff going on, stuff spilling into the ground and impacting our soil and groundwater. So what my team does, we're called the Environmental Restoration Department. We go in, we study the subsurface by installing a bunch of different wells, and then we put pumps into them. We take out the groundwater or soil vapor. We treat them above ground in a variety of different systems. And then we also have different ways of like releasing the clean water back into the environment, whether that be in the local waterways or back underground.
That sounds very exciting. Like that sounds like a sector of like natural defense that a lot of us don't know about, but it's like super important for it.
Yeah, for sure.
In general. Actually, I was wondering because you have a strong, like, varied history with being an environmental engineer through different companies. I was wondering, like, here you're doing remediation at Lawrence Livermore. Like, what does that look like at other companies? Is an environmental engineer the same at every single company, or does it look different in different roles?
So personally, I always worked with remediation at each of the companies I was with, but as an environmental engineer, your role can really be varied. You can work specifically with air emissions, and so all of the companies that are operating currently and they're releasing into the air, they have an environmental engineer working with them to calculate the exact amount of chemical they are releasing into the air. If that's in compliance, they have to report it. And so that's another part of it, as well as like what we call hazmat kind of is spills that are still happening right now to this day. They want it to be cleaned up right there, right on the spot. And so there's a portion of environmental engineers that work kind of in that department. So it doesn't get to the point where it becomes like historical contamination and I have to come in 100 years later and clean it up. And there's so many. What else is there? Also, there's surface water engineers. And so what they do is, along with air emissions, companies, manufacturing companies, refineries, they're always releasing things into our waterways currently. And so there's environmental engineers that come in, test that water, do the calculations, make sure it's within regulations. So anything that's going out into the world isn't going to be harming anyone in the future, which is, again, when I come in, if there is something that is highly toxic and it seeps in after they release it into the soil, into the groundwater, and then that, travels who knows where, whatever that subsurface system looks like. And so then you have to come in later and capture it and extract it and clean it up.
Oh, that sounds very complex. It's very exciting for students now even to hear that there's so much different like variety inside an environmental engineer role. So they can literally like do anything they want in different areas. So that's really exciting, especially that you also know about those different areas as well. And then speaking of like your history going from chemical engineering to like environmental engineering now, from when you were majoring in UCLA, could you tell us more about that journey from like your major, like the clubs you were a part of, and how that led you to your role today?
For sure. So when I was applying to colleges, I always knew I wanted to do something environmental related, but I also really wanted a bachelor's of science. And I saw at that time, I don't know if it's changed now, UCLA was only offering a Bachelor of Arts for environmental engineering. So I really enjoyed chemistry when I was in high school, and I thought, let's see where this goes. Like, is this going to get me into the field or not? Like, it's something that I really enjoyed. And I know as a chemical engineer, I'm going to have a lot of options in the future. So I decided to come in as a chemical engineer with the environmental option. And I did a lot of exploration throughout my 4 years through research laboratories, internships, and talking to my friends in different organizations. So one of the first internships I did was at Abaxis, which was a biomedical company. And I learned at that point, I don't want anything to do with biomedical or medical. Like, I just didn't enjoy it. Like, I was like, this is not the path for me. And so then after that, I joined a research laboratory in the civil engineering department with Dr. Shaylee Mahendra, where she researched with bioremediation. And that was my first introduction to remediation, and I absolutely loved it. And so I was like, wow, this is like amazing. This sounds like something I would really be interested in the future, but I still wanted to take some time to explore and really nail down, like, is this what I want? So after that, I did another internship at a clean energy company called Bloom Energy, where they like basically create alternate sources of energy. So fuel cells, and so that's when I learned, like, number one, I love environmental, so I definitely want to stick with that. But the experience I had in the laboratory was like really fundamental for me to be like, yes, remediation is what I want to do with the rest of my life. So when I was working in the laboratory, well, actually, let's bring it back a little bit. So you also mentioned how clubs related into it. I was really active in the Society of Women Engineers. And that was really important for me to be able to get that opportunity at Dr. Mahendra's lab, because she was also connected with SWE. And I was like, in my first and second year of college, cold emailing professors, asking professors after class, like no one had any room in their research laboratories. And it was really difficult to really find that connection. And so being a part of SWE and being face-to-face with Dr. Mahendra, like maybe monthly, if not more, and being like, I want to work in your lab. Can you give me a position in your lab? So I was able to have that connection with her and be able to work with her. But also, another thing that helped was that SWE also had a relationship with the company that ended up giving me my first full-time offer, AECOM. And so by developing those relationships in SWE, doing the work in Dr. Mahendra's lab, I was able to get my first full-time position within remediation, environmental engineering, right after college with AECOM, and just jumpstart my career in that way.
Really exciting, especially when you said, like, I started off at this major and I realized, this isn't for me, and then you moved on to like a different sector. So that's really exciting. Personally, for me, I've done the same. Like, I was pre-med my first 2 years, and I was like, you know what, let's switch it up, take some internships that are relatable. So it's really good to see that, like, that's very common in a lot of successful alumni such as yourself. So that's really exciting. And then also, just like as a side note, you mentioned Society of women engineers as being like very pivotal to like your connection to your research experience. I was wondering, just as a fun question, what's something that you really miss, or what was a really good experience at UCLA that you enjoyed as your 4 years here, besides like clubs or anything like that?
Ooh, beside clubs. So I would have to say the relationship that I developed with my first year, like hall residents. I was in Dykstra Hall, and there was a group of us that just got really close. And so we stuck it out all 4 years. We were still really good friends, and just having that dorm experience was really amazing for me, because I was able to have such a great group of women to hang out with and bounce ideas off of. Because when you join clubs, then it's some people who are also immersed in the same major as you and the same experience as you. But by having all of those different experiences through my friends who were like psychology majors or pre-med or accounting, And then some of them joined sororities. So I was able to like mix up what I was doing and have a really good time by hanging out with them and enjoying every experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly why we reached out to you, because we know that the UCLA Alumni network system is so huge and everyone's very supportive of each other, even for freshman year. So that's really exciting to hear that that's something you really enjoyed. Actually, now that you talk about like having a support system of like women, I was wondering if you had any pivotal advice for aspiring like women engineers. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say don't ever be nervous about any situation that you're in. Um, so there was an article that came out several years ago now, which talked about how women in science or in STEM in general make less money than men because they are like, we've been taught from a young age, like be quiet, be respectful, like don't ask for too much. And so we don't ask for those raises, we don't ask for those promotions. But when you spend your 4, 5, 6, whatever years, if you also do graduate school, going through an education and having that higher education, that means that you have put in an investment into you, and that company needs to kind of return that investment and also invest in you. So you are not only giving them your experience, they also need to give you that same respect. And so if you're in a position where there are other people who are getting those raises, getting those promotions, and that isn't coming to you, then ask for it. And if they don't give it to you, or they give you some lame excuse, then go somewhere else that will give you that, the respect that you deserve and that position and the pay that you deserve.
Yeah, that's great. Especially like a lot of students, even now, and then I'm sure like as they graduate, face imposter syndrome. Like that's advice that could go for anybody, especially women engineers. So that's awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And going back to like you talk about like remediation, how like you're an intern and then now a full-time engineer for that. I was wondering if you could give us a more specific like picture into that. Like what does a typical day look like for you from like morning to end? What are the tasks, people you work with, projects?
Yeah, for sure. So I will give you an overview of kind of like all the different companies I worked with because it's been different at each one. So as an environmental engineer, it's pretty typical to start within consulting. So that's what AECOM is, the consulting company, as well as my second position at Haley and Aldrich. And you're basically, the company has contracts with a bunch of different other companies like Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Phillips 66, Chevron, and you are a specific project or maybe multiple projects where you have a bunch of different tasks. So you could be working in the field collecting samples, you could be writing reports, you could be doing calculations or just literature research if something's not working and you need to find a new way of what to do. So, you're kind of spread thin over a bunch of different projects. And so that's where I started off. I was doing a lot of field work, which is really, really typical for environmental engineers in their first like 3, 4, 5 years, because that's where you really get to learn what the subject is and, be able to implement it in the future in different ways. And so after 2 years of working with them, I decided I really didn't want to do that much field work anymore to the level that I was doing, because I was out pretty much every day for like 12 to 14 hours. And so I decided, there's not really room at AECOM to be able to explore different avenues of consulting. So I want to see if consulting is the right place for me. So I applied to a bunch of smaller consulting firms like Haley and Aldrich. And so I got that offer and I ended up moving to Kansas with them because I would be the only entry-level engineer. So to get that experience in a new light, like not only be doing field work, but be able to do whatever other projects they're working on in that office, since there wasn't going to be any other competition. But when I went there, I realized that even though there is opportunity to work on different projects and to learn different things in consulting, especially for someone within their first 5 years, doesn't really get the opportunity as much because field work is a priority. And so I decided, let's just throw it out there and let's see what I can get after about a year and a half. And I ended up getting a position as a remediation program manager at Linksys in Arkansas. So I went there for a year and I absolutely loved it. It was really different. I was still in the field because as an environmental engineer, it is important to be outside in the environment. But along with that, there came a lot of management. So I had to work with people and I had to present to upper management. I had to sell my ideas. I was working with a $36 million budget and I had 5 consulting companies working under me and I loved it. I really did. But then I thought it was going to be a detriment to my career and what my goals are to have been thrown into management at such an early age. I was a 3 to 4 year or 4 to 5 year professional at that point. And I really, really wanted to dig deep into treatment system design, research at this point in my career, since that is what is going to help me kind of figure out, do I want to go into management in another 5 years? Do I want to be a subject matter expert? So then I put myself out there again and got the position at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. And so here it is a lot different than consulting and being a project manager because my position is to solely be an engineer. So I look at numbers, rarely write reports, just internal, jot my notes down, whatever is in my brain, and then someone else takes it and makes it into an actual report. I do a lot of design work, so I'm working with what kind of valve needs to go here? What is the right pump that needs to be designed to get out a certain flow rate of water, which is exactly where I wanted to be at this point in my career. So I can really dig deep, learn that nitty-gritty design details, how to do that research. And then I hope to be here for 5 years, finish up transferring my professional engineering certs to California, get a master's, and then figure out what I want to do after that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely sounds like you've been through a lot of different roles and you figured out this isn't what I want and moved on, did your job search again. So that's really exciting to hear, especially for incoming graduates of this year. I was actually wondering, you were talking a lot about you start off in field work or even management consulting. That's a lot of interacting with people. I was wondering, how do you think COVID has impacted your current role in industry in terms of right now it sounds like you're working more on an executive level, so maybe it's not as in person, no environmental field work, but how do you think COVID-19 has affected environmental engineers in general?
So in different ways. So if you work in the field, then you were considered an essential employee from the beginning. And so, it didn't really affect them at all. They were still going out, doing what they needed to do. But at my level, where a lot of it is design work and then occasionally talking to the people in the field to see if the systems that we are designed are actually working, it's been a lot more difficult because it's not as easy to get onto site and see the systems. If something is going on, then sometimes I need to put my eyes on it to really understand what they're describing. And you can't just do a video call at a national lab. They have really high security protocols. So it's just made it a lot more difficult to maintain and troubleshoot, operate, design. But as we slowly start coming back onto site, it's been a lot better because we're able to have that face-to-face interaction with the people operating the system, see the system for ourselves, and makes it a lot better without being stuck at home.
Yeah, thank you for the vaccine. We're hopefully going to ramp all the way back up in the coming summer or months. So that's really exciting to hear that environmental engineering is essential. So it didn't impact it that much. So that's exciting. You already talked about what you really liked. It sounds like you like to nitty gritty and seeing how that nitty gritty makes major impacts. But I was wondering again, if you could talk about what's your most favorite thing or rewarding thing about your work, and then what's something that's very challenging that you have to overcome daily or in the role in general.
Yeah. So The most rewarding part, I would say, when I was working in at AECOM and I was doing a lot of field work, there was a lot of times where we would be in public areas like a Costco parking lot. So we would have people come by and like, be staring at us like, what are they doing? Like they're putting equipment into the ground. Are they, contaminating our water, or are they dumping something in there? Is this like a corporate espionage or something? And so having the ability to be there and like as an engineer have that conversation with them, like, no, we're not doing that. Like this is for XYZ reasons, and this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it works. And seeing them like kind of understand that and realize that and know that like there are people out there who are trying to protect their health and protect their resources. That was like really, really rewarding. Just like having other people know what we're doing, and we're not like, trying to create more mess, and companies are really investing into protecting health and environment. And then challenging, I would say that would be rewarding and challenging is pretty much the same thing, those people interactions, because as an engineer, it's really common for people to say, like we're awkward, we like to just be at our desk, like, we're introverts, and it's a lot of energy for us to interact with a lot of people, but not even just environmental engineers. I feel like all engineers in the corporate world, we need to talk to one another a lot, bounce ideas off of each other. We have huge teams that we're working with. So that does become challenging on a day-to-day basis, because it does drain a lot of that energy when you just want to be sitting at your desk and like looking at your valves. So yeah.
I mean, it's everyone has to, deal with that every now and then. So it's really exciting to see that like you still tie that in with the rewarding part of it. So that's really nice. I was just wondering, like, it sounds like a lot of it you say like is technical skills that you need from the major, from interning. But I'm wondering, like in general, like what kind of experience, skills, or accomplishments are important to break into environmental engineering successfully?
So a lot of the skills have to be learned on the job. So it's pretty much getting that research experience, internship experience, or your first position at a consulting firm, because like a consulting firm specifically, not just like at a specific refinery or, plant, because you need to be exposed to as much as possible from the start of your career. So you know what it is to do remediation and the field work associated with it. You know what it is when they're talking about the different aspects of being an air engineer, and like air logs and the air calculations and emissions, like how to look through the rules and regulations set by the state and by the federal government. And so like really just trying to find either an internship or that first consulting job is what you need to kickstart your career. And then after you spend a couple years there, you can pretty much go anywhere, especially if you put yourself out there, get as many projects as you can while you're working at that firm, and as much experience as possible, then you can end up being a program manager 4 years after graduation.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the best pathway. Hopefully, everyone is able to do that, just like you. Actually, something else. Like speaking of, pathways and like the past 4 to 5 years in the professional workspace for you. I was wondering, as an environmental engineer in the industry, if you've noticed there's like general public interest has risen in terms of like caring about the environment, or like sustainability, or like a lot of companies are like greenwashing now. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that, or like why it's happening. Like, is it going to die down, or just general thoughts on it?
So when I started in 2015, actually a little bit before that, because I was in the research laboratory, so like 2013, 2014, environmental engineering was not considered like important. It wasn't considered like a valuable career or something where you can succeed in or get the pay that an engineer deserves. And I have seen that completely change over the past 5 to 6 years, where environmental engineers are highly coveted. It's a very like niche and specific type of experience that you need. And there's companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google who are like putting out requests for people with a lot of experience in this field, because the political climate has changed so much over the past 5 years with, like individuals like Greta Thunberg, or even our own, like, the next generation who are out there protesting and putting it out there that we need to make a change. We need to figure out different ways to protect the environment, which has made environmental engineers, like, so highly sought. And we get that pay that we deserve. We are considered an essential employee. Like, if you come in as an environmental engineer, you're like set for life now. Like, if you're a petroleum engineer, your career fluctuates with oil and gas prices. Like, if it all drops for a while, then you just get laid off. And when it goes back up, then you get hired back on. But environmental engineers are required all the time. They always have to have a budget for them. So I think it's been pretty amazing that like we are now like this coveted, and that like we have opportunities wherever we want. Like, we can be at any company within the US. We can go abroad and work anywhere we want. And I don't think that's something that's going to die down. I think that's just going to continue amping up, because like, you're always going to need an environmental engineer at any company you have. And a lot of companies are beginning manufacturing, like Google, you think that's a search engine, right? But now they're manufacturing like phones, cars, doing research, and who knows what. And so they're going to have emissions. They're going to be releasing chemicals. They're going to be purchasing plots of land that have historical contamination, so then they can expand. So they're always going to need environmental engineers.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely as just like a casual watcher of like the environmental like engineering space, I like I started seeing like, climate change starting to be talked about, and then like environmental engineering definitely as a career started to be talked about more and more. Like, my little brother was interested in it, and he's still trying to see how to break into it. So I'm definitely going to take these notes to him. But that's awesome to hear that like you guys are set, because like we need you in this society. So that's really exciting. I think my last question actually is that you're talking about how like every company needs you, like, or every like country needs you, like you can find a job anywhere. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the differences of working like a national defense company versus like a corporate interest company. Like, what are the motivations differ in terms of like your role, or like, do you see differences? Which one do you like better?
So there's pros and cons to both types of environments. So when you're in a corporate environment, then anything that they're doing outside of environmental engineering is for profit. So we're using money that is for profit. So there's a little bit more of a leniency. You can work at a little bit slower pace. But along with that, there is like, you have to go to upper management, and you have to make sure that you are asking them, for the right amount of money and using it for the right thing, but they have that money readily available. So if I want to purchase a piece of property, then I go through that chain and I can do it fairly easily. But with working for a national defense contractor like Lawrence Livermore, the money that we're using is taxpayer money. So there's a lot more oversight on it, and you need to make sure you thoroughly do your research. And when you're going up that chain, there is a lot of backup information that you need to make sure that you're using the money correctly. And so, like, everyone is working so hard, putting their money into this, and we don't want to go out there and like purchase a piece of property and it turns out there's no contamination on it. So there's just, a lot more of that oversight and that knowledge that you aren't using money that was gained by profit. You're using money that people have worked hard and are putting into this, for us to give back to them, for their health, for the environment. And so, yeah, it's just that additional pressure.
No, thank you for definitely like talking more specifically about the differences, because I was always wondering that. Like, I also feel like as an environmental engineer, you always have to be considering like, where the money is coming from, or like where the money is going to go as an like interest for the environment. So that's really cool to hear you list like more specifically how that feels in those different roles. I think that wraps up like our all of our questions. If anyone in students in attendance want to ask questions now, now's the time. If not, we can ask more questions on my end.
Yeah. First off, I just want to say thanks for coming by. I did have one question. I noticed that, I mean, just from what you're talking, you have a lot of experience. You've been to a lot of places, but like you've stayed like a year or so at each one. Did you see, like when you were looking for jobs, was there any like negative implications of only being at each place for a short time, or were you able to get over that?
No, there was not. That was something I was actually pretty worried about. So when I from AECOM to Haley and Aldrich, that was really common after 2 years, like trying out something new. But after that, like, you know, I only stayed there for about a year and a half. And then I went to a new position. And so I was told at that time, like, I need to stay there for 5 to 10 years. It looks really bad. I'm changing positions too often. Like, no one's going to want to hire me. But when I was looking for my next position after Arkansas, then I was like, well, if no one wants to hire me, then they won't hire me. Like, I'm just going to put my resume out there and see what happens. And I got a lot of interest. I got, 2 offers, and ended up going with Lawrence Livermore. And I talked to my boss there, and I actually had that conversation with him. I said, you know, I moved around a lot. Like, were you worried about hiring me? Were you like, hesitant, or, like what drove you to hire me, even if I seemed to be like a flight risk, is what I was called by other people. And he pretty much said, like, even if I stay here for 1 to 2 years, they're able to get the work out of me. And so that's all they need. And if they have to hire someone to replace me, then that's what the current environment is like. It's highly competitive. And so that means that they weren't doing a good enough job to keep me there. And so it's not just on me to make it work at a company, it's also on the company to make it work for me. And so it's not really considered to be a negative thing, especially currently in this climate where, I feel like software engineers have really carved out that path for us because they change so often, like 6 months to a year. And it's actually encouraged to try out different companies, try out different types of work, different types of fields, and figure out what you want in that first 5 to 10 years. So then when you become a more experienced professional, then you can really dedicate yourself to that one company and grow within it.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Hi, I had a question too, but first, thank you so much for talking to us about everything. So I was wondering, as an entry-level engineer, did you find that you were able to work on a variety of projects, or did you kind of feel, I guess, like limited to similar experiences that you had in undergrad? Like, did you see that you were already put in like remediation projects right away because you had that experience in Dr. Mahendra's lab?
So as an entry level, especially in consulting, you need to put yourself out there to be able to get those experiences, because you have the manager that you report to, and so you start off and you're limited to whatever projects they work on. But then if there's a bunch of other project managers out there and they don't necessarily have engineers working under them, or they have so much work that the engineers working under them like don't have the time to do it all. So I really had to go to all of these different project managers in my first year and develop those relationships. So I got to learn a little bit about air. I got to learn a little bit about waste management, and then do a lot of remediation. So it's really up to you on gaining that experience by putting yourself out there and getting the projects that you are interested in and developing those relationships, so then they can then refer you to other project managers that you might not be familiar with. Like, I was working out of Orange, California, but I was referred to project managers in San Diego, in Northern California, outside of California, because I had developed those relationships with the project managers there, they heard that there's other projects out there where my skills could be put to use, or they're looking for, an entry-level engineer to just like do some grunt work. I do the grunt work, and then I get to work on the more interesting projects after developing that relationship.
Thank you for answering that. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of like straight out of undergrad, you have to build those relationships, you have to network within the company and not just outside for like a job. So it's really good to hear that you talk a little bit more about how like, all of us have to do grunt work at some point, and then you end up being, a program manager at Livermore. So that's exciting. We do have only 4 minutes, and I don't want to accidentally keep you. So if no one else has any more questions, if you could give us just like any last parting advice to students here and then later students watching, like what is some last parting words or advice you have for aspiring environmental engineers?
Yeah, I would say if you are interested in environmental engineering, then and you're passionate about it, wherever you are, just make sure you express that passion, because that is what everyone is looking for. They don't want someone who just wants the paycheck. They want someone who's going to like work hard. Like I was saying earlier, the money that we're using is either taxpayer money or it's for-profit money from another company. And so we're not bringing in any profit. And so we need to be using that money carefully. So they're always looking for someone who's really, really passionate about the subject, so that they know that they're here because they love it and they want to make sure they do the best possible job. So in your interviews and whenever you're networking, just convey how much you love the subject, and that really puts you a step further than someone else, even if you don't have the experience at that time. If they find that you're someone with a personality that's going to be able to fit in a career like this, then you will have more opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Like, I definitely sense your passion just from our quick 30-minute chat. So it's really nice. Like, I'm sure employers or even interviewers can sense that immediately. But again, thank you so much for taking time to share your experiences with us. I'm sure, I've taken a lot of advice from it in general, even if I'm not in this field. So that's really awesome. And then I was wondering if it's okay for like students listening in now or later, if they wanted to reach out further for questions with you, if they could do that on your LinkedIn or anything like that.
Yeah, of course. And if you want to share my email with the attendees, that's perfectly fine as well. And I think my profile is on UCLA One, so reach me there, or LinkedIn. I actually do prefer email or LinkedIn though. And yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Have a great time at your sister's wedding.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. So much.
Thanks.